host of many of these evenings, and we have the added pleasure of having this recorded because it's our intention to take this and some other things we have and make a promotional video out of it. So this is our evening is, the intention is twofold. So thank you, and turn it over to our moderator, Catherine.
Turns out I'm the moderator this evening, and I'm excited to ask some questions and hear answers and maybe offer my own answers as well from time to time, since I'm also an alum. But the idea here, yes, okay, so we've got recording devices and Miles's equipment around, and yes, the intention is twofold. One is to have a dialogue, live conversation with alums from Tara about their Tara experience and what from their Tara experience are they carrying into their lives as adults, and many other facets of questions. And so to record and also to talk, and I'm hoping that the feeling that we can have in here is much more casual and comfortable and coffee house-ish than might be implied by the presence of recording equipment. And just before everybody came in, well, actually some people coming in while this was happening, we were doing some recordings with a few students, current students, asking them to restate some of the things that they had said about Tara trips on travel night, and it was just remarkable. They did a wonderful job, but it's also remarkable to see, you know, as soon as there's a camera in the room, people kind of tense up or seize up or dissolve in various ways. And you have to kind of work through that. So I'm sure we'll warm up as we go, but let's try to invoke the atmosphere of a coffee house or someone's living room or dining room table in our chats here. And we will start with introductions. In this living room, there are a few mothers and daughters. Would someone mind closing that door? Thank you so much. It's not to exclude, but more, I don't know, think about open doors. Okay, so let's start with introductions. And what we would love to hear about include your name, the year you graduated, and your current profession or life pursuit. And we could start with Natalie or with Erin.
What does that mean?
I'll start. Hi, I'm Natalie Simpson. I graduated in 2006, and I am currently pursuing music, in particular singing and opera performance, as my passion.
I'm Neil Ritter. I graduated in 2005, when this was essentially a garage. It had the floor, but other than that, it was essentially a garage. Let's see. Yeah, my profession and vocation are essentially all mixed together. I run a nonprofit organization called the Laughing Coyote Project. I teach primitive and ancestral skills. I also am a subsistence farmer in Boulder County. I milk a cow every day and butcher my own meat. And I homeschool kids, which is probably the most important thing that I do.
I'm Relena Gordon. I am class of 2001 with Catherine and Erin. Before we had a school, and I am a professional photographer. I do all of the performances and graduation photography for Tara, as well as other stuff out in the ethers. And my life pursuit is to figure out how to be independently wealthy as an artist.
Hi all, I'm Rihanna Magruder. I'm class of 2016. For 1 year of my schooling, I saw this as a garage, but then turned into this. My current life pursuit is attempting to go to grad school for applied theater, which is utilizing theater with communities in a therapeutic and rehabilitative way. I'm also teaching
Region 8, and I also do conflict resolution there at the UPA, and I'm also a poet.
Yes, thank you so much for those intros. Welcome, everybody that's trickling in. We're psyched to have you here. Again, I just want to say for those that just got here, yes, there are recording devices around, but at ease. And I have some questions, some of which are mine, some are Chelsea's, some are my mom's. As we go through them, if you're coming up with questions that you'd like to ask these lovely human beings up here at the end, there will be time and place for that. Okay, so if you can all think back to this, what drew you to Tara in the first place? Were you interested in coming to Tara of your own volition? Did your parents tell you you had to? Was there choice involved? And if you were electing to come to Tara on your own, what was it that interested you about this school? And anybody can jump in.
I was not particularly interested in theater, surprisingly. But I love music. And so my 8th grade year, I joined the Candlelight Choir and was I felt immediately a part of the community of the school. And we had, I went to what used to be Shepherd Valley Waldorf School. And in 8th grade, we had some sampler days where we'd go and visit as a class in different schools. And I can't remember if we did one at Tara or not. I did. I shouted a day. And then I quickly realized as the rest of my class went to visit other schools, I just wasn't interested. So yeah, I decided, in conjunction with my parents, probably they were very supportive of it, but it was very much my decision, I would say. I was the only person from my class who came to Tara, so I left some very close friendships to be here. And the theater thing, I was planning to just do tech the whole time. That's kind of funny because I think I was in 11 or 12 productions in 4 years. The first one was about a month after the school year started, so that didn't last long. Yeah, so I guess that's where it was. Yeah, it was a sense of community immediately that brought me here.
Awesome. Yeah, those were back in the days when we let other people be in the Candlelight Choir and we weren't at Tara yet. Yeah, and I kind of remember there was a moment with you locking your knees in candlelight.
Yeah, I almost passed out.
Yeah. Well, there was this whole there was a ripple going through the school that Neil had to kneel.
And it happened a lot in blocking as well. Laura would yell, "Neil!" I'd come running out. We weren't talking to you, they just forgot to change. First of many.
Is anybody, others that would like to answer that question, what drew you to Tara in the first place?
I was at Boulder High. I started at Boulder High, and my first year there was great, and then I was in a car accident with my mom, and I had really bad whiplash, and I could not get caught up. And it was a huge class, and none of my teachers would catch me a break. And my mom had heard about Tara on the newspaper or somewhere, and she's like, let's check it out. And I did a shadow follow mid-semester, and I remember Michelle Arietta talking about the sound that urine makes when you're peeing in a toilet bowl. It was musical. And I had this moment of like, these are my people. I felt like, and it was a small class, I felt seen, and I felt like I could show up and I could be weird and I could be wonderful, and it was such a welcoming community experience as well. Yeah.
Others?
I can jump in.
Great.
So I knew of Tara because my dad taught at Tara, taught math very, very briefly. And so it was sort of in the ethers as I was growing up, and I don't remember this, but apparently he brought me here to in 8th grade, I remember in considering which high school I would go to, and similarly, none of my friends were considering Tara. I just had Tara in my mind. I just knew that that was where I was meant to go. And one of the reasons definitely for me was the performing arts and my love for theater and how it embodied what theater and the performing arts are. But in addition to that, each piece just added onto itself. I came for a shadowing day, and I remember being in 8th grade and sitting at the picnic table out there with the current 12th graders at the time, just being like, they're so cool. I need to be like them. They were so grounded and so welcoming and so comfortable in their skin. And, you know, being in middle school, that is not the case a lot of the time. And so seeing teenagers inhabiting that and living into themselves was just inspiring. And everything lined up in terms of what Tara valued in the small community and the performing arts and the way they held academics and the way they held education, that even in 8th grade, and obviously I had much to learn and still do, it just resonated immediately in terms of me needing to be here.
I'd like to share mine too. My mom was actually working here in the office. Yeah, she'd been there for 1 or 2 years, I think, by the time I was ready to enter high school. And I went to Shining Mountain, and middle school was kind of a tough time for me. I didn't really feel like I meshed with my class. And yet, in 8th grade, when everyone else is moving into high school at Shining Mountain, I was like, oh, maybe I do want to stay with my friends, and high school might be different. And I don't know, I was pretty on the fence. And my mom said, well, just go shadow at Tara, just try Tara for a year and see how it goes. And I've always been kind of shy and, a little like, don't look at me, just let me blend in the background, I'm not here. And I remember walking into the 9th grade that I was shadowing, and Morgan Hoddes, who was in Neil's class, just turned around to me and went, welcome to Tara. I was so taken aback that someone would just see me and open arms just welcome me right away without knowing anything about me. No need to prove anything, or so that went deep. And then a friend of mine, a close friend, also switched as well, so that made it easier. But sort of hearing my mom say, well, just try it, just see how it goes, be open to it, and the immediate welcome and acceptance really made it for me.
That's great. Miles, how about you?
Yeah,
What drew you here?
I'd been in Waldorf all my life, coming up from before kindergarten even, and kind of after reaching into middle school, I was faced with 3 kind of distinct choices, or I guess, yeah, pretty distinct choices. There was the choice to go kind of into public school. For me, that seemed pretty daunting. It was kind of like learning a whole new education system and having to start from the beginning, making friends. Not a lot of my friends decided to go that path. The other path was to continue on with just kind of a normal Waldorf environment. But immediately upon coming to Tara, as many have said, there were these sampler days. It was like I was addressed by the teachers and then told to call them by their first names, and just saw how personalized the education was, and I think that's what really spoke to me. Even kind of delving into my first year, I found that I was always really individually met in the classroom with what I really needed to hear and where I needed to kind of be met, adapting to being in high school. So I think that's also kind of what kept me around after that first year.
Awesome. Let's just dive into the performing arts a little bit more. Lately, we've been having conversations, even just today, with some of the students at Tara. We were talking about the performing arts and whether it is, is it initially an obstacle for people to enroll here, because we're not cranking out, people who are headed to Broadway necessarily, and that's not the objective, but wanting to talk about what it is that you got from the emphasis and the immersion in the performing arts while you were here. How do you use that? How does that show up? How has that impacted your life and your profession now? Obviously, we are at Tara using the performing arts as a vehicle for self-development and for understanding community. But we're sometimes confusing for people when they come and see these incredible performances. But let's dig into that. What did you personally take from being in plays and musicals and participating in choir? Where do you see that showing up in your life? And not necessarily literally, but how would you say that has impacted you as you've grown?
I can jump in. So the performing arts, I think, is a really misunderstood field, particularly with Tara, because what Tara does with the performing arts is so different than anywhere else. And I know I faced that myself when I left Tara, and I said that I loved theater, and I said I did performing arts and went to a performing arts high school, and people's impressions of that and misconceptions of what that meant. And I think conveying that what Tara is doing is building whole human beings, and that is what the performing arts can do. Doesn't always do it, but that's what Tara is doing with it. And it's doing that through, I mean, you have to face everything in yourself. You have to face being terrified to go on stage. You have to be incredibly vulnerable. You have to realize that your own self-work that you are doing, memorizing all your lines, really understanding your character, the storyline, all of those things, that's contributing to a bigger picture, to a whole, to a community. It just fosters this culture of camaraderie and teamwork and facing failure, and all of which are absolutely vital qualities for facing life in today's world. And I think the performing arts aspect of Tara, I obviously have this other side of loving the performing arts myself in my life, but in a more general way for those who are not necessarily wanting to do acting, it brings about human qualities that every human being needs and will be deeply served by.
I can speak to not, I did not come to Tara because I wanted to become an amazing actor or performer in some respect. That's not what drew me. But I can speak to what I think that education brings to my life now and my profession. And as you were asking the question, Catherine, I started thinking, I kind of want to like crowdsource, like, what do you all think happens when we collectively do a play together, or learn to sing with one another, or memorize lines, or this. So I'm curious, what arises in your minds when you think about that process. And for me, one of the things that comes to mind is listening. And the power of that. And I think even if the only thing that we get, so not the only thing, but if the only thing we were to get from a Tara education were to actually really learn how to listen to one another, think of the ripple effects of that. And so I bring that into my work. I bring that into my work as an attorney. I bring that into my work as a mediator. And I think that's an essential aspect of the performing arts and the way in which Tara facilitates our engagement with topics. To be responsive to one another, not reactive. Right? That difference. To be really present with one another and with oneself. Yeah, that's what I would add.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin. Yeah, others?
I have a little bit to say, but I just want to make one comment when you talked about the idea of doing something well, even though the goal isn't to produce professional actors. And I think it's such an interesting thing, raising my kids right now, how any activity that they do becomes competitive so quickly. The idea is always like, oh, they're 6 years old, they're going to the Olympics, they're getting a college scholarship in this endeavor. And we seem to be disengaged a little bit from this idea of, can we pursue excellence just for its own sake, just for our own growth? So that, I think, is important. But in terms of the performing arts, as I said, I came to Tara not planning to do a single play. To If we're talking about like transformation, I mean, it happened pretty quick for me at the school. And then an interesting thing happened as I got to the end of 11th grade. We did the Secret Garden, and I played the role of Dickon. And I really wanted to go deep into the character. And so anytime that I wasn't in school, and I wasn't rehearsing, I was climbing trees and looking for bird nests and crawling around in ditches. And just, I grew up in like suburban Longmont, so it wasn't like the wilderness. And I realized how much I loved being outside. And I contemplated a lifetime of being indoors, and I couldn't do that. But the reality is I'm a teacher of a sort, and so I'm performing every day. The only way that I can support my students to be engaged in what I'm offering is by telling stories. And I think in this world, I think about my grandfather who had one job from when he started working until he retired. My dad had a handful. Those of us, many of us, our careers, our livelihood, our life, the way the world is looking right now, it's about telling stories. It's about telling my story, sharing it with other people, so maybe someone will listen, so that we can develop connections with each other across seemingly unrelated areas. And so I think that, learning how to perform taught me how to tell stories.
Beautiful. Storytelling was I came wanting to be an actress and wanting the performing arts piece, and discovered after moving to LA that that's not what I wanted to do. But I really loved the storytelling piece of it, and that's why photography became really important to me. It's another way of connecting with people and telling their story and finding humanity in little pieces. And I think theater helps us find the heart and soul of people that are similar to us and people that are different than us. And I was thinking back to our senior year, I think it was, we saw the Laramie Project that had just first come out, and that was the same year that Columbine had happened. So we were going through these really deep, heavy issues, and theater became a really accessible way to explore complex issues. Yeah.
I think adding on a little bit for me as well, as much as it was about like really learning how to listen and hear each other, also I think a large part of it was about kind of like finding and developing my voice. I think through those experiences, I've really learned how to kind of, in a way, captivate an audience, or depending on the situation, really adjust my style of communication to work with whoever I'm communicating to. So I think that was a really valuable takeaway, if not a direct lesson, definitely an indirect lesson of kind of theater, what theater has to offer.
I kind of want to answer this question too, even though I'm asking it, but as I was listening to others answer, I was thinking about being steeped in theater and how the process of starting reading a play together, then beginning to rehearse a play and assembling all the pieces and parts of it, tech-wise, costumes, lights, sound, set, and the human element, and then the audience coming, and how does all of that work? It's like we do over and over again a process, and we learn to do that together collaboratively, and we learn how these other pieces have to intersect and interweave. And for me, I feel like it's taught me to look interested. I'm always like, how were we talking about this? I think we were
The
talking
bowling
about
alley.
Oh yes, we went bowling. We went bowling recently, and I was like, this is just such a cool study. You know, like we're gonna have a great time, but what are the sounds? What are the people wearing? What is the vibe? What are people doing? How are all these different characters, body shapes, and how are they moving? And I remember learning to do that and get really interested in that when I was disengaging with the class being interesting in high school. Like if I was no longer tracking what was being taught, I was like, this is character study. And I had a French teacher in college that, I was just sharing with Leela and Grace about this recently, but I had this French teacher in college who we didn't really get along very well, unfortunately. But I was like, I have to finish this class. I need to complete this. And so I'm just going to really enjoy figuring out exactly what his accent sounds like, how the little wisp of his hair moves. Like, I mean, and I'm like, gonna use that, you know? I will use that sometimes. So this like study of people makes me feel interested in life, and it will go somewhere. I don't know when or where, but now I can talk to students about studying other people's movement and listening to how they talk and listening to your own voice. What does your own voice sound like? So it's a vehicle for being interested and remaining interested. We have a lot of disengagement with knowing how to find interest now. So I feel even more motivated to continue this here.
I think I would just add a couple of things because everyone said everything so wonderfully. I was going to say something about the artistic process and
Sorry.
understanding of that. No, thank you for saying that. And I would just add that I think it gave me a lot of opportunity to self-reflect, to learn about myself. I mean, from something as simple as, you know, how is this character like me or how is it not like me? You know, having to do that sort of self-analysis. So it brought a lot of awareness and being present with myself and through all the difficult things. And then how to bring myself to work with an ensemble and work together and feeling like, you know, one small part of this process and how everyone together creates the whole and like the magic, the alchemical process that happens through that and through working with yourself in order to bring what you can to that.
Some alchemical indeed. Does anyone else have any thoughts or ideas they want to drop in right now? Okay, let's go to the next step after college, or after high school, after Tara question. So, thinking about what it felt like to integrate or begin college, if that's what you did, or what your next step was, whatever that next step was that you took, what did you find yourself bringing to the outside of Tara environment? If it was a college classroom or another form of study or another educational path, what did you notice that you were bringing to that you were drawing from your Tara education? How did you feel prepared? What resources did you have? Or which resources did you have to source?
Maybe having gone through this a little bit more recently, I think now it's a little more fresh in my mind. But definitely kind of after stepping out of Tara and into the college environment, it was certainly an adjustment. I'd say, you know, going from Waldorf to just kind of a more normal educational environment. You know, it's definitely an adjustment, but I think it's not an adjustment that Tara didn't. Like Tara very well prepared me for that. I'm not going to go with the double negative there. It's something that I felt really like prepared to step into. I think there's kind of a couple like secondly, talking a little bit about academics, I think kind of making that transition, if that's kind of the place you're going into higher education, I think that the study habits and the way I really learned how to learn at Tara really well prepared me for that. It's definitely different, just learning things from a textbook and memorizing it and keeping it in your brain for 15 weeks and then dumping it all out on, a 3.5 hour sheet of paper. But I think that the way I really was prepared to go about it was a smoother transition than I thought it would be. So I think those are kind of two of the main aspects where Tara really prepared me for that transition in maybe ways that I didn't quite realize or understand until like halfway through my first year when I was like, wow, this is actually going pretty well.
Thanks, Miles, that's great. Others? Next step, integration, learnings, gleanings?
I didn't go to college. I got into a lot of them, but I couldn't quite, what I imagined as the perfect fit, I just was struggling to find that. So I started traveling, and that was, I'd make a little bit of money and then go traveling, I'd buy a plane ticket somewhere, and go for, typically, each one of my trips ended up being about 4 months for whatever reason. And then I got back and I would kind of apply to a few more colleges and get into a few more colleges. And then I'd go travel again. So in 2 years, I traveled to 25 different countries. And rarely starting out with more than $1,000 in my pocket. So I had to make friends to sleep on their couches, or hang out with a Romanian monk and sing in a monastery in Romania, and try to convince him to let me scythe the hay on the hillside. But he wouldn't. He was like, "You're here as a guest. You can't work." But we traded songs, and so another piece of the performing arts was like the music. A lot of us spoke about theater, but the way many of us connect is through music in the world, and so that served me well. Being able to dance, or not always able, but willing. So it allowed me to make a lot of connections there. So I never integrated into a college or university environment. But what I would say is something I believe that I took away from Tara, one of the many, was the willingness to learn new things. Of course, we have classes that we go to and homework, and we did, candlelight, and we did theater. We traveled to some pretty incredible places with incredible experiences. But we also would build a set and learn how to use a drill, right? I had to learn how to do a trucker's hitch to tie down the load of set materials on the truck. I had to learn how to drive that truck on an icy road full of set materials and unload and reload different warehouses every 6 months. So I would say in my what I did essentially as my job is I started a nonprofit. I have no business experience other than doing that. I learned how to speak another language. I recently learned how to have a budget and run board meetings. I never was given official schooling in any of these things, but I was given the tools to believe that I can learn how to do anything.
Yes. Beautiful, Theo, thank you.
I'll tag on to that because the first thing that sprang to mind to answer the question was a love of learning. And in reflecting on my post-high school path, my gap year turned into 3 gap years, during which I explored a lot of different things. The first year was to kind of work here and volunteer at the Humane Society and follow our veterinary around on his rounds because I was interested in veterinary science. And then I realized that maybe wasn't for me, it just felt too dissective, having gotten into and visited great colleges for that path. And so I reoriented and went to music, which was music and also with healing. And I remembered, my cat used to love listening to me play cello. She would lie on the couch and like need the pillow. Even when she got injured once actually, and she couldn't move that well, so she just parked herself on the couch, and I would play open strings, and she would purr. And I think it speeded her healing process. So anyway, Acutonics, it uses tuning fork vibration, and I was interested in Eastern medicine and the points and meridians of the body. So I took workshops doing that for a year. And then I decided I was ready for college. and I think taking that time and pursuing these things, I felt like I was gathering tools, and that I was, there's so much to explore in the world. And so taking that time, and with the support of my parents, it really helped me commit to college and enjoy it. And I found one that fit me really well. And yeah, and then that led me to, taking voice lessons when I was ready. And then my professor saying, so what do you want to do with your voice when you graduate? You want to be an opera singer? And I was like, I could do that. And like, yeah, I could do that. I could try to do that. So, yeah, that sort of belief in yourself, and the taking time to gather the tools and learning for its own sake, because what an amazing world we live in. Building on the thinking and the research and everything, exploration that generations of people have done before us. So, yeah, that answers the question.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Thinking about your talk of like theater being this process and how we develop and learn through this theatrical process, I think the same is after graduating, that we've got this foundation to explore and this freedom to explore and trust that this process, we're going to get to the end, and we don't know what that end is yet. And I did a similar thing. I didn't think I was going to go to college. I got accepted to a bunch of schools. I went to LA. I did community college, and I studied ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics and dance and astronomy. And like, I was like, whatever, I'll study it all because I was curious. And this like deep curiosity kept coming and wanting to learn more. And I have my master's now after thinking I wouldn't even go to college. And I think Tara instilled just this deep curiosity and trusting that we don't have to take a traditional path to get to the end goal. We trust that we're taking the right steps forward. So that was my journey next, of just stumbling forward and saying, okay, catch me, universe. Yeah, beautiful.
I would echo so much of what has been said. I'm trying to narrow down what to say because there's so many things that are coming to mind. But I would really echo these pieces of curiosity and a passion for learning and a passion for being engaged in the world. Even something as simple as putting our phones in the cubbies at the beginning of school, that is so different than any other school. And I felt that immediately when I was in another educational setting. I went straight from Tara into four-year university. And I could feel, for those that were not encouraged in that way, that it was a different relationship to education and learning, and that this support that Tara gave in being a well-rounded human being, and that there was no part of me that needed to be adjusted to account for others, but that all could flourish together. And a great example of that is what I ended up majoring in, which is theater and math. Quite opposite. I had to attend to both sides of my brain. And that really was fostered by Tara. So many people I talked with once I was in college, they were absolutely shocked that both sides of me had continued to be alive up into that point of life. Many of them had experienced that they were kind of funneled, not necessarily overtly, but were kind of funneled as either an artsy theater person or a STEM person. And those two sides of them, they felt were not allowed to exist simultaneously. And I feel so blessed that that wasn't even a question in my education here. I felt so seen in both those aspects, and that they were not conflicting. They actually can go together and support one another. And the additional piece that I want to plug in here is how the kind of less tangible qualities that Tara brings, how that very directly and tangibly impacts academic success. And for me personally, and only 1% of graduates are considered for that. And I feel so grateful because in that process, when I was invited to potentially be a member of it, so many of the qualities that they were noting and had observed in my academic journey were qualities that were fostered by Tara. It was being well-rounded, having both a theater and math, having a deep care for learning and showing presence and professors feeling that, and having a care for giving back to my community, to the world, and all of those things were fed by Tara and were instilled in me as important pieces of being a human being in both academics and outside of it. And those qualities allowed for quite an academic achievement, which I think is really important to note because we can really get narrow in test scores and numbers and very specific reflections of certain skills. And these softer skills of engaging with the world translate to those more numerical values. They encompass that.
Oh.
Dang.
Can I add?
Please do.
So I'm listening to all this, it's like jogging memories, as you said, Miles, it was a long time ago. So I want to share two short little vignettes, these memories that have come up, and then just an observation listening to everyone. So one vignette is I remember visiting my undergraduate school, and I remember being in the class, in the English class, there were maybe 25 students, and I'm like, looking at my seat, probably like this, right? It's like ridiculous. It's like overboard. But there I was, and I remember the teacher asking these exciting literature questions. And I'm like looking around, and the other students, like, I haven't read the book, but like, you have, and surely you're going to say something, right? And no one said a word. I was like, I haven't read the book, but I remember that level, and it was maybe a little annoying, but I remember that level of that desire to engage with my fellow human being, and sitting there quietly, unresponsive when someone in front of me said, "What do you think?" was so foreign to me. It was as though I was in a one-on-one conversation with someone and they said, "How are you?" and I just looked the other way. Right? Socially, that would be so strange of us. And so that is absolutely the kind of classroom setting that Tara fosters and achieves. So that's one vignette. The other one was I remember being in a drawing class, Drawing 101. In college, and I remember the professor taking me aside and saying, "How'd you learn how to do that?" No, seriously, where'd you learn that technique? And I was like, what technique? I'm just looking at the piece of broccoli and trying to. Seems like a one for one here. But he, and I don't say this to brag, but because we all have these stories, right? He noticed something that was so natural to me. I was not aware of it. It was not conscious in my brain at that time when I was 20 years old or whatever it was. But that's something that's instilled and comes so naturally that you do it, and someone from a different perspective is able to say, "That's pretty amazing. That's pretty remarkable. I want to know where that came from." So then, just the observation and listening to people. We talk about this well-rounded aspect, right? This well-faceted. I'm a mathematician, and I also do drama. I'm a poet, and I'm also an attorney. I study economics, and I also play the piano. I started my own business, right? All of this, and we talked about ensemble earlier, and the theater, and what that does, right? To learn different characters, different aspects of ourselves. So they're connected, and we talked about this thing in conflict resolution called perspective taking, and it is a sign of an effective response to conflict is our capacity to take another perspective. And so when we learn to take the perspective of a mathematician, just as well as a poet, just as well as a chemist, just as well as a historian, just as well as a farmer, just as well as a business owner, we are taking those different perspectives right within ourselves, and that So that is our capacity as human beings, to really be in this world with one another. And I was listening to all of that and really wanted to underscore that aspect.
Heck yes. Any other thoughts on that particular question coming up from you all? Okay. Another one that I'd love to go into right now is, do you have, this is a little bit lighter and perhaps could be quicker, but also could be really long depending on how you take this. Do you have a favorite story from your time at Tara? A favorite anecdote? An experience from travel? A Betsy story? Those are their own. Its own entire category. Not everybody has to answer this, but yeah, a tale from Tara. Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm kind of initiating something here. So I mean, I loved school. I loved working hard, studying hard. I also was caught either by Betsy or John Kelly climbing on the roof of his house. One time after rehearsal, because I was always interested in sort of exploring the world. Yeah, but I think that there was, what's so interesting is my nonprofit is called the Laughing Coyote Project, and everyone always asks me where that name comes from, and I believe that there's such a place for humor, as we all dive so deeply and seriously into life, to also realize those moments when things are a little ridiculous. Like the time that we were in London and we realized on top of our doorway there was this great ledge. So I boosted Darian on top of it, and somebody who was waiting with a camera, which was a film camera, I'm sure, for when Betsy came in. And I don't know, like his head came down, and we got a great picture out of it. And what was so amazing is that it was like, then everybody laughed, we didn't get in trouble, no one was angry. Yeah, and the time that, I didn't, like, I think 2 or 3 kids had cell phones when I was at Tara. And the first year we went to New York, I think we flew to Newark and we took a bus into the city. And Betsy had a phone. But, and I think, God, I can't remember if it was George or Leonor that, for whatever reason, were on the bus with us. And they had a phone, so Ari borrowed the phone, and he called Betsy, who must not have had I don't know if he even had contacts on the phone or not, and he told Betsy, as impersonating the hotel, that we didn't have any rooms available. I don't know, we were all just cracking up in the bus as Betsy, I don't know what you were doing, but somehow, for about 20 minutes, I think you probably found enough hotel rooms for us. It probably was in 6 different hotels in New York before I think Ari called her back and was like, just so you know, we figured it out. But my favorite Betsy story is one that's not actually particularly funny. I mean, maybe a little, but it was our last couple of days in England on my senior class trip, and Betsy calls the airline to make sure that the trio they had their seats together so they could talk on the flight back and not have to deal with us probably. And found out that our flight had left the week before. So they booked the wrong tickets. This is post 9/11, but not that much. Like, things were pretty sketchy still. Like, you were kind of, paying attention in the airports and everything. And so, of course, Betsy goes into crisis mode. How are we going to deal with this? And the question was, well, a few of you have to stay a few extra days. Who do it. I got it. Don't worry. As long as you need me to stay, I'm fine. But we showed up at the airport for our flight. And, instead of the couple hours early, I think we went there 3 hours early, or 4 hours early, with 16 people. And we all got on our plane for free. Well, other than the tickets we already paid for. When I come up against obstacles, running a small organization with a limited budget, and sometimes people telling me things aren't possible, that's one of the stories that I remember.
That's beautiful. Tara Tales. We don't have to hear from everybody on this if you've got one available.
I think along the lines of things being possible. My little less than the second half of my time in Tara was marked by COVID. And as we got into my senior year, things were starting to shape up and we were able to come back, but I think there was a real distinct presence at Tara that made that transition really smooth and made Tara really happen, and that was this character called the Rogue Booker. The Rogue Booker is Betsy. It was a Catherine and I developed, but it kind of refers to how far Betsy went to just make it a real normal and just great experience for us in that last year. We had a tent outdoors where we were able to rehearse and just spend time, in accordance with whatever kind of social distancing or whatever laws that were in place. But instead of kind of just resigning to, staying online and staying far apart from each other, there were measures that were really taken to, give us this last year, make it really something meaningful, like it is just in any other normal year at Tara. So I think that's also definitely defined for me, what it means to go out of your way to ensure that, those around you, those who, really have a relationship with are, really kind of seeing what you have to bring. So I think that's kind of along those lines, the story about, what's possible, and especially at Tara, how you learn about that.
Yeah, I would just have to add to that on your senior year, Catherine and Ken created an entire trip around North America. I mean, the United States, Western United States.
Huge group effort.
Unbelievable. In like 10 days, they put it together and off we went. Instead of, well, sorry, you can't have a trip because we can't go to Europe,
It's really exciting to face adversity with an idea of possibility. It's really exciting. And there's so many things that can shut us down. Just say like, okay, we're getting no's, we're getting no's, we're getting no's. We're running into walls, it doesn't seem possible. And I really do think that there's like a drop of like a spark of light that comes into all of our lives from having been a part of this, because we are constantly facing these large or small impossibilities, and everyone surrounding Tara has always been supporting the idea of exploring possibility against all odds in many ways. From the beginning, from the beginning till now. It's really, really kind of an incredible and irreplaceable quality about being here that you can pick up from participating in it. Okay, any other tales? Rihanna, you got one?
There are so many stories coming to mind. I just don't know which ones are okay to be on video. So I'm sorting through. I think I picked one that's okay. Sorry, Betsy. And I'll finish with the second one that's very short and hopefully will balance. So this was at the end of our Europe trip. We were in Cornwall, and we were in the house that, I don't know if that's where you stayed every time, but where we were staying. And a group of us were in the kitchen eating digestives, the chocolate covered ones. I remember it vividly. It was quite late at night, later than we were supposed to be up. We were supposed to be in bed and asleep already. And we hear Betsy shuffling around, doing what she's doing, closing up the house. And we're kind of being really quiet to make sure she doesn't know that we're staying up later than we're supposed to. And all of a sudden, Betsy, we hear her kind of struggling with the door a little bit. And she comes into the kitchen, and she knew we were there, obviously, so already we're caught. But she didn't care about that because she was mixed between shock and hysterical laughing. And she proceeds to enact what had just happened with the door. Something had gotten in the way of the door, and so she was struggling. So she was struggling with it, and she was showing us, half crying, half laughing. We're trying to gather what the heck she's saying. And she was struggling with the door, going back and forth, going, gosh, why isn't this closing? There's nothing up top, there's no lock, nothing. And she looks down, and there's a toad jammed in the door. And Betsy, I cannot tell you how long we laughed, and also felt very sad for the toad, but we were laughing with Betsy for so long for the rest of the trip. That was just a reference point. And those moments of seeing Betsy's joy, particularly in senior year, are just so special to me and so invaluable. And the second one that I want to say, to hopefully balance exposing that, is that I remember the last candlelight, the final candlelight in my senior year. And we, after exiting and singing Gaudete and blowing out our candles, my entire class, we just looked at one another, and as we looked in each other's eyes, all started sobbing. And we came in together and we're giving each other a group hug, many very much ugly crying and sobbing and wailing and all of these things, not because of anything negative, but because we knew what we were part of, and we knew how beautiful of an experience we were contributing to and creating. And of course, the sadness of missing that. We knew we were going to miss it so deeply, but even more so, this sense of belonging in the world and creating something that mattered with people that we loved so deeply because of being in experiences like that mattered. We grew to love each other so much, still to this day. Many of them are my life people. And that sense of meaningfulness and light in every way, in candlelight literally, but in heart light and world light, that just transcended beyond it all and was so felt in my experience at Tara.
Excellent. Excellent. Anyone else? All right. What would you all say if you were to talk to a parent that was on the fence about whether they should send their kid to Tara or not? In this moment in your life, what would the why be for you? Why would you send your kid to Tara?
I think you're not just creating students or academics, you're creating humans, whole, caring, beautiful humans, and that's so much more important than just the academic pursuit.
Connection. I would say, there's only so many people in the school, only so many teachers, only so many people in your class, not really anywhere to hide. And you have to develop strong connections. And I think that is a skill that you take out into the world, an attribute. And it's so interesting because in a class, even like my class, which was we were a big class at Tara, there were 13 of us. And when you look at all of my classmates, I mean, we're everywhere doing everything. None of us are that similar. And honestly, like I wish I maintained some of those friendships better, and I didn't, because we all followed our passions in such a broad way. But I also learned that I can make those connections with anyone, even if they're not like me.
I'll jump in and add right on to that. With the friendships that are so dear to me still, that I feel very blessed to have continued and that worked in our lives, we talk about the three that I'm thinking of right now. We frequently talk about how if we had not gone to this school, would we even be friends? All four of us have completely different interests, completely different life paths, completely different moments in life right now that we're going through. And it is so beautiful to be able to witness that in one another, learn from one another. based off of a hobby or a shared interest, which also is beautiful. But there's something about seeing others' humanity that Tara fosters because, like Neil said, you're in a class of 12, give or take, people, and you can't run away from that. If you face any drama, any conflict, which inevitably happens in adolescence, there's not really the space to go, I'm just going to abandon that and I'm going to find new friends. No, you have to show up, both of you, and work through that conflict and learn what it is to be relational and what it means to work through difficult conversations. And that element has allowed me to have such deep and profound friendships and relationships in a way that I see a lot of people in the world not having, where most people I talk to, even 1 year into college, were not in contact with anyone they went to high school with. And that element of connection and seeing one another is so valuable. And this space of community and fostering what a person is and what their gifts are in a holistic way and valuing that and having the space to value that, I think is immensely important in this day and very special for a student to receive in this world. In many places they would not receive.
I would say, alongside the education itself, the cultivation of your really core values, integrity, and sticking to your word, kind of like what we talked about before, ensemble or communication, connection, uh, dedication to your work, striving for a high bar, and yeah, that's kind of what I've got at the moment. I might add more later, but basically I feel like, yeah, what Tara fosters is definitely core values. So if you feel like your core values resonate with the ones presented here, then that's a really good reason to send your kid.
Erin, what about you? What would your why be for sending a kid to Tara? Or even what would you say to your past self that was wobbling on the fence about whether or not to come to Tara?
Yeah. What did you do? Where you are now. Well, I mean, in your question, Colin, I mean, I would want to ask, tell me why you're on the fence. I'd love to hear the concerns. I'd love to hear what's going through your mind that, what are your questions?
Yeah, go for it, Mindy.
My little daughter, my second daughter, doesn't want to come here. She doesn't want to leave her friends. She's in BBSD and wants to go to her neighborhood high school. And I'm on the fence of, do I make her come? And she's going to be angry. And I have to live with her. And we all have to live with her. So, yeah, and it's hard to make your daughter do something you know she doesn't want to do. But I think she needs it, So I'm on the fence because I
then that wonderful quote, and I feel silly that I can't remember the name of who said this, so maybe someone can help me. But that beautiful quote that says, "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive." Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And what I hear in that is not, not about a selfish pursuit of like, oh, I love video games, I'm gonna do that, or I love playing my cello, so I'm gonna do that, and that, that's enough. Of course, we need to be in conversation with what the world needs. But what I do hear in that is what Natalie was talking about, of getting in touch with our core values, and really being alive to those. So I think that that's something that Tara brings, fosters, facilitates, empowers, and yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more pointed to your question of, what would I say to my 16-year-old self, making that decision. I'm so glad I did that. I'm so glad that I had the courage to follow what felt like it was deeply in line with my values, even though it meant some loss. Like, don't pretend that there's not loss there, right? But what I can say is those friends that I left are still some of my closest friends today. We live, a mile apart. So I think, it's sort of like big picture, right? Like the ensemble, the different perspective, the different facets, when we have the long game in mind. And I know that, when I was 16, I wasn't thinking about the long game. So I understand that, but I just guess just to answer that question of, what would I say to my 16-year-old self, I'm glad I made the push, and I'm glad my mom pushed me, because she absolutely did. And she said a similar thing, which was, give Tara a try. And that was what enabled me to get into the door. Give Tara a try for a year. You really don't like it? You have a choice.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think as a teenager, things are really immediate.
Yes.
Like, if so-and-so didn't sit next to you at lunch, you're not friends anymore. That's heavy. I was just talking to a neighbor of mine who's like in his 80s, and he's like, oh, I think I'll only be able to cut hay for like 5 more years. I'm like, oh, sweet. That means I can cut his hay in like 5 years. That's pretty quick. So it's like your perspective changes. And so, yeah, it feels like you're on, choosing your high school feels like you're on the edge of a cliff. Choosing college feels like you're on the edge of a cliff. And it's like, life is long, too. And I think that one of the things I talk to a lot of the teens I work with now is trust in the adventure. If you made the wrong choice in a year, go back to your friends. If that's the right choice. But choosing the easy path is, anything worth doing is not really easy, right? I really struggled to learn how to read. Took me a long time. I was almost 10 years old, fighting at it. I loved reading, but it was not easy. Anytime, if you want to get stronger, like working out, it's not easy. It's like, oh God, here we go again. I'm going to punish myself. But it's finding those edges of our comfort. You have to trust the process. And I had dinner a month ago with 2 of my closest friends from middle school who went to a different high school. We still kind of hung out in high school. After that, we went in different ways. We shut down a restaurant. We had stories and connections and so much, in 20 years of barely seeing each other. But the spark was still there. It's like, and if you go to different schools, you can still have friends other places. So I think that, offering comfort in discomfort, offering the belief that, when you jump, sometimes, like, you're gonna someplace pretty cool.
And I read
when following your friends, are you finding yourself? And what does that mean in terms of having what is really needed for you to flourish as a human being? And you're her mom. You also can sense that and hold that for her in ways that she isn't ready to yet. And that's really important in terms of what is education? What's the purpose of education? And it's the holding of who this beautiful person will grow into. And I think emphasizing that and that friendships will come, beautiful friendships will come as she grows into that too. And that simply just adds to the beauty of all the friendships she already has. And I think holding that, even though, yeah, there will be upset if you choose that route, but I think in the long term, I know myself, I really see the value in having developed myself in my education, holding me in that way has allowed me to bring in friendships that are so meaningful to me. And that is such a vital part of having friendships, is being held in who you are.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you again, everyone. I think this feels like a good time for me to open the floor to questions from those of you that have been listening here so beautifully. Thank you for your attention. And yeah, so anything bubbling up for you right now that you'd like to ask any of these wonderful human beings here? It could be a pointed question to one person. It could be a question to all of us. What do you got? Go ahead, Scott.
To the middle schooler parent who is Rihanna, maybe more left brain, math, science oriented like I was. What do you say to them when they say, I want my kid to have great academics in high school so that they can get into their college of choice?
I mean, jumping in, I would echo what I said earlier in that what Tara fostered in me allowed me to have that academic success, both in tangible and intangible ways, in the incredible classes that are academically demanding and require responsibility. And I mean, main lesson blocks, if you miss one day, you have so much to catch up on. Like, you cannot, there's a rigor in that you have to attend to that is not built in other settings. And I think that builds immense accountability in terms of academics. We have teachers, including myself now, teachers that care so deeply and give their heart to this work and want to build that capacity in a student. And I would say too that this idea that I've come up against most of my life because of having done both theater and math and both sides of the brain is they complement one another. They can come together, and the focus on the fact that Tara does performing arts and that you draw in your main lesson book, and there's a lot of artistic process in that, only further aids the development of left brain critical thinking and engagement with rigorous academics.
Miles, what would you say to that question? I kind of remember at some point you said that you came to Tara because of the math.
Yeah. I mean, so looking at kind of my two Waldorf options, looking at Tara, it had the same kind of rigorous level of mathematics that I saw at Boulder High. It has an advanced track. I was able to finish calculus by the end of my senior year. I am definitely a more mathematically oriented person as well. In college, I'm doing quantitative economics, financial and actuarial math. So that's definitely the path I've chosen. And I think I have a couple kind of realizations around the whole college and also like adapting to college academic side from a more STEM mathematical side. First of all is just kind of like the preparation going into it part. I would say that all of the science and math that I did here at Tara, back to my previous point of like it really kind of prepared me to be able to learn that in a more traditional sense. It's not necessarily taught like by the textbook science and math here. It's a very in-depth and almost intensive process. But I think that prepared me really well to then step into the just kind of semester-wise progression of a regular biz. My The other side I'd say is looking at that back from the college standpoint about what admissions people in college are looking at. I'm actually an intern this year in our admissions office at Union, where I go to school. So I've had a fair amount of insight into that process. And aside from the few schools that are just looking at like test scores and like just your transcript, in my looking at it, I will acknowledge we are a liberal arts school definitely, but we're also very much a STEM school. What I see that our admissions officers are looking at is the student very holistically. More and more schools these days are test optional, so that like kind of numerical factor isn't even as much of a great thing. But beyond that, I found that through my education at Tara, I didn't have too much of a hard time going through the testing route. Anyways, I took the ACT, I took the SAT, going into that process. But then, back to what admissions folk are looking for in that student. They're looking for someone who's like kind of breaking the boundary. Their biggest tools for judging you are reading your essay and kind of looking at your involvements. And so looking at both my transcripts, like what I submitted as a student, and then from the other side, having been a little bit on the inside of some of the discussions we're having about do we admit a student, having interviewed students, I'm seeing that what's really standing out for these admissions deans is that the students breaking the mold. They're not just a 4.0 like just academics, maybe a sport student. So I think that's kind of the perspective that I've come to have about it, having seen it a little bit from both sides.
I don't know what it's like now, but when I was at Tara, we had 3 math classes for my grade with 13 students. I believe my junior year, I can't remember if there were 2 or 3 of us in my math class, and our teacher at the time was a retired math professor from, I don't know where he was from, School of Mines, maybe somewhere around here, CU. And I liked him so much that one summer I just like did an extra year of math in the summertime, just to get ahead. So I don't know, like, again, I don't know what it's like to use that to get into college, but I was given a lot of, if I was allowed to go at whatever pace I wanted to go. In my case, my pace is typically a fast one. That's what I prefer. But there was an interesting, kind of on a side note, when I was struggling to figure out which college to go to, there was one that I thought was going to be a good fit for me. And a mentor at the time said to me, it sounds so nice, but do you think you'll be intellectually stimulated there? This was kind of like a hippie farm school thing, essentially what I do now. And I was like, oh gosh, yeah, maybe not. So I didn't go there. And now, with a little bit of perspective of being somebody who's very intellectually stimulated in the world, it's kind of like, well, yeah, if you're curious about life and you have the opportunities and the support from teachers to go full bore ahead, go for it. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're in that supportive environment because the resources are available. So yeah, I would say if academics are important, and I would say, and if the academics are important to the child who wants to really charge there, when you're seen by your teachers, by your community, it's a lot easier to give them those resources.
I mean, I think you can and you do get into the college of your choice. I think that.
I did.
Every single choice. I think 4 months. The list of colleges that Tara students get into are Ivy League. I mean, there's just that's not. So I would challenge a little bit sort of the premise of the question, because I think the answer is you can. Period.
Other questions? Yeah, Natalie.
Maybe this is a little bit off topic, but what kind of advice would you give to students who are starting to look at what they might do with their life after Tara?
Hypothetically.
I'm asking for a friend.
It's kind of cliche. there's we had to read Man Search for Meaning, by Viktor Frankl, senior year, and there was this. I found this one little quote a year ago actually that drove me nuts when we read it. I was so infuriated because he said the old man is more fortunate than the young man because he has his memories of all of his life experience. And here I was, 18 years old, like, come on! Like, I'm about to go for it. Like, I'm about to have my adventures. And, and so I was like, that can't be true. I'm the lucky one because I'm about to have the adventures. And I'm like right in the middle of those adventures right now, still. But I'm looking back at, like, wild moments. And I think there's this grace period in there where it's like, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have kids, you got a lot of guardian angels for who knows why. And so you end up like sleeping in the woods in Slovakia, like you're gonna be cold, but you're gonna be all right. And so like, just chase down the adventure, make the memories, because along the way you're gonna find something that you want to devote your life to. And then you might, 20 years later, think, I got something even better. And that's okay, you've got a long time, so don't get stuck worrying about being responsible. Take that responsibility to explore the world.
Yeah, I don't think there are any right choices. Like, we all got here taking so many different paths, and none of them were direct. So make wrong choices, explore, be creative, just keep playing, and trust. Like, you have a really beautiful community that is still here. Like, Tara, 20 years later, has still been this incredible resource for me, and I love seeing like students coming out of it and continuing to grow. So there's like, this community is always here for you. So go make those mistakes, go explore, go play, and you'll find your path in that process.
I would add to that, just very similar to what they're both saying, but the path can only reveal itself if you are walking on it, if you're moving. So have that movement, like they're saying, just reiterating that. Follow those passions, those impulses, those excitements, but also you don't have to know that it's the right thing even in that moment. You could say, I don't really know exactly what I need to do or want to do in this moment, but trying something. And that, even whatever the experience is illuminating and you learn from. And so trusting yourself to have, that you do have the capacity and you do have the skills and you do have every gift that you were given and have built up in your life to navigate that, and that illuminates as you move forward.
Questions, other questions from the listeners?
I have one.
Yeah.
From Neil and Miles. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you have for your 9th grade self?
Wow. Don't be afraid to share your feelings. I would say that it's interesting in theater, we have to expose ourselves so much. And yet I would say that emotional intelligence is something I have struggled with in my life. I come from a family that's fairly stoic. It's like things are good or you don't talk about it. And it's still a journey I'm on now. And I think about, and there's like a difference between sharing your feelings and whining, right? But the times that I was afraid to share how I felt. If I had started that in 9th grade, I think especially, I'm not a teenage boy right now. But it's like, I wanted to be strong, and I wanted to be tough, and I wanted to be dependable. I wanted to fit into many of these stereotypes that are given to us. Still strive to be strong and tough and bold in my life. But being willing to share my feelings, I think, would have been pretty awesome too.
What about you, Miles?
Yeah, I think I have to really strongly
was that for you in going through the 4 years? Was it difficult, and what did you or did you not value about that expectation?
I'm talking a lot, but I would say
How
that.
you feel, Will?
Yeah, I think that the cool thing about Tara is that there's so much space to integrate between the different classes, right? And that was what was so cool, is that I had however many kids in my class on a given year, and yet I had friends throughout the whole school. Also, each class was kind of its own little microcosm. I would say that, my class, for most of us, it was not that hard. When we would hang out, it was like we'd enjoy, we'd have like get together for game nights and we'd go dancing, like folk dancing. And so I would say, it wasn't particularly challenging for me. The challenging part was like to unwind from that afterwards. Like when I was traveling in Europe and staying with someone and they would offer me a beer, I'd be like, oh. Regrets it, I would say that it created a sense of like we didn't have to. There was like no need for much. There wasn't a lot of need for judgment. If I didn't want to drink or I thought they were bad for drink. I don't know, like whatever. It was just not a part of the scene.
Yeah.
And so it was like there was enough going on. Right? There's enough going on in these social interactions without having an extra wrench thrown in the system that worked for me. Honestly, essentially still does. It's like really fun to just like lift weights with other people. Get in a sauna and do a cold plunge. There's all sorts of ways to get yourself whacked out of your mind. It feels pretty good.
What about you, Erin?
I was going to say that it was actually one of the things that drew me to Tara, like one of the reasons why I chose Tara. I I had such a sense of integrity. Really, I remember in the former school that I was at, we were asked to sign something that before we went on a class trip that we would not partake in substances. And I signed that piece of paper, and my name meant something. And it didn't mean the same thing to some of my classmates. And that was really hard for me. Talk about the immediacy of that age and what can feel so black and white and this or that, right and wrong, and all of that. And now I have more nuance in my life, but I still have that sense of integrity. And that was something that I sensed and knew about Tara, was that I don't even think I thought of it as, oh, I know that that's a rule that Tara has. I think I more sensed it as I met these students and I sensed within them that when they signed a piece of paper, their name meant something. Like, that was huge to me, and it still is. So that was one of the initial things that actually drew me to Tara, and then throughout Tara, I think similar to you, Neil, like it just didn't feel like a thing. And so maybe that's not the best testimony, right? Like sometimes I wish I had like a more challenging story, and we had to overcome this and that.
it is so obviously valuable and inherently supportive of being present and discovering yourself at that time in life and being fully conscious for that process. And with that, as some have alluded to, the transition from Tara, where that is so sacredly held and respected between students and in the entire culture and community, going to the outside world where that is not the case was difficult, but there was something that was incredibly important in knowing, like Erin was saying, what my values were, what my integrity is. And of course that evolves as you grow and what exactly that means, but being able to hold that in yourself, that you can inhabit whatever space you want to create, and you do not have to go with whatever the status quo is saying. And that is such a valuable quality to have while navigating life for anything, substances or otherwise, and just being able to know where your center is. And the second piece that I'd say about that is having a substance-free environment also allowed my friends and I to be wonderful goofballs in the best way. I mean, there were so many times, both in high school and once we graduated, where we would be crying from laughing for so long, and people would come up to us and assume we were on substances. Would think we were not sober, and we were like, no, we're completely sober. We just know what joy feels like with one another and can feel the joy of life and didn't need anything to add to that. And I remember bringing some of my friends from Tara to college and us having experiences like that, and people around us being just floored that there was not some added substance that made us tap into that level of joy, but that we just did because we love each other and we laugh.
I think we have time for one more question, if you have one. For you all, is there anything you wish that we had talked about that we didn't? Is there a question you wish had been posed?
Go on, Joe. You got something.
I can come up with something. I would say, I would say the biggest challenge I had in choosing Tara was athletics. I love sports. And I think there's, that was a challenge for me, honestly. I wish I could have played sports in high school. Now do I wish? I don't know if I wish now. At the time, so it was very common in every break we had. I mean, it was soccer, it was tackle football, it was ultimate frisbee. The volleyball scene was a little different. It was a little rockier, but we still went for it. And so I was lucky enough that when I was here, I mean, there was we found a bag of foam swords once, and there was a whole battle happening after rehearsal one day. I mean, I was lucky that there were enough people interested in that it met a lot of my needs. But that was, and I know when I was at Tara, that was the big decision a lot of kids had to make was, how do I navigate the desire to do athletics? And I didn't figure it out, but a lot of people did. My sister did. She ran track, which was pretty cool. I just got so caught up in theater unexpectedly. I didn't really have time, but that was, I would say, I was lucky because I still got to play sports, but I lost the ability to do it in an organized way, which was something that up to that point had been really important for me.
I like this. I was expecting this question maybe of what, right? All this glowing. Oh my God, so amazing. But what? Okay, let's get real. What are the challenges? What are the drawbacks? What are the losses? What are So, but in the spirit of time, though, I guess I just want to say
agree with the substance agreement and you choose to play sports during the breaks, or to carve out time if that's really important to you. And I know the school works now with various sports schedules. And so it might be a lot, but you're choosing that. And what I took away from the substance agreement was kind of like what Rihanna was saying, this understanding this feeling that I had a choice of how much to partake. If I wanted to try this, try that, and to what extent, and that is how I operate with, alcohol. And now that it's a very conscious choice. Whenever I partake, it's because I'm like, oh, I'm in this certain context and I feel safe, and I'm making a choice. So it's not an automatic response, and it's not a crutch, and it's so it's very conscious in that way. And I think that consciousness in choosing to be at Tara also gets cultivated every day that you're here, and that helps you along down the road as well with making the choice of what to do next and what to try and what to explore. Okay, thank you.
That was I think for some of the alums, some of the graduates, it's maybe been a long time since you said the morning verse. But I had this feeling when I was thinking about this last night. I was like, what if we closed by saying the morning verse together? And so there are people in the room that say that every day, but I would like, if you're willing, to stand up and we can say the morning verse together, and then we will be done. And we can do our best to make our yeah. We can leave hats off. All right.
I look into the world in which the sun is shining, in which the stars are sparkling, in which the stones repose. The plants they live and grow, the beasts they feel and live. The human being within their soul gives dwelling to the spirit. I look into the soul that lives within myself. The world Creator weaves in sunlight and in soul light, in cosmic space without, in depths of soul within. To thee, Creator Spirit, I will now turn my heart to ask that strength and blessing for learning and for work may ever grow within me.
Blessings on our night.
Thank you all so much for coming and have a beautiful night.
Thank you.
You guys take care.
Thank you.
I just want to say,